My name is Nick Burns. I'm a faculty member here. I also direct the Future of Diplomacy project. This is the program that has invited the ambassador. Our project aims to accentuate the importance of diplomacy in the modern world. And I'd like to suggest for our session today that there is no more important diplomatic relationship in the world than the one between China and the United States. Think of it this way: China and the United States are the two most powerful countries in the world, the two largest economies, the two most important and powerful militaries, the two countries with largely defined global interests, and we share a lot of common responsibilities. If you think about the future international challenges, Ambassador, for climate change, the struggle against trafficking of women and children, the struggle against international crime and drug cartels, the struggle against pandemics and poverty, the United States and China will be largely responsible for international peace and security in the future. But we're also two countries with a complicated and complex relationship. Because for all the issues that unite us, there are certainly issues that do divide us. Important differences over human rights and religious rights and trade. And I know from my experience working with the government of China as a diplomat, differences over issues like Iran and sometimes issues like North Korea. So a complicated relationship, an important one, and we're very pleased that the ambassador has agreed to be with us today. The ambassador is going to give a prepared address. That's on the record. We'll televise that. We'll put that on our website. He then is going to answer questions, but that's going to be off the record at his request, and of course we've agreed to that. And so I just wanted to remind all present what the rules of the road are for an off-the-record address. What off-the-record means is you may not quote the ambassador outside this room. You may not blog. You may not run to the Harvard Crimson and print an article, or the Boston Globe, or the New York Times, or any newspaper in China. And so since the ambassador is our guest, I wanted to make sure that all of us respected his wishes for the question and answer session. I think he'll be much more able to speak freely in that session. I know all of you will have good questions to ask him. Let me just say a little bit about him. Ambassador Zhang has been ambassador of China to the United States since March of 2010. Before coming to the United States, he was ambassador and the permanent representative of China to the United Nations from September 2008 to February 2010. And so he was involved in many of the issues where China and America come together, including the North Korea and Iran issues in that position. He served as Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of China from 2003 to 2008. His portfolio covered a wide range of issues, including responsibility for African, European, North American, and Oceanian affairs, for arms control and disarmament, for international legal and treaty issues. And before that, he was Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2000 to 2003, responsible for administration, protocol, and personnel. He's had a long career in the Chinese diplomatic corps, a very distinguished career. He has served in Beijing in a number of other capacities. He's also served in the United Kingdom. He studied at the Beijing Foreign Studies University and at the London School of Economics. And it's a great, great pleasure for us to welcome him to Harvard. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Burns. Thank you very much for your introduction and for inviting me to the Canada School of Government. Today, I would like to speak on two issues. First, on China-U.S. relations, and then on the impact of China's development to the rest of the world. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the reopening of relations between China and the United States. 40 years ago, the Chinese and American leaders, with great vision and political wisdom, made the decision to reach out to each other after 22 years of estrangement and hostility. It was a decision that opened a new page in China-U.S. relations and brought about profound changes in international relations. In this connection, I want to recognize the unique role played by an outstanding Harvard alumni, Dr. Henry Kissinger, for his secret visit to China in July 1971. 40 years later, despite ups and downs, China-US relationship has surged ahead and has become one of the most important and dynamic relationships in the world. The economic interests of China and the United States have been closely interconnected. We are now each other's second largest trading partner. Last year, bilateral trade reached $385 billion. China has been the US fastest growing export market for the last decade. And US exports to China increased by 468% from 2000 to 2010, while its exports to other countries increased only by 55%. The United States continues to be the #1 source of foreign direct investment for China, and China remains the #1 foreign debtor for the United States. Dialogue and consultation at various levels have increased and improved. There have been frequent high-level visits and exchanges. Over 60 dialogue and consultation mechanisms have been established, covering a wide range of areas, including the strategic and economic dialogue, the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, the high-level consultation on people-to-people exchange, and the recently established Strategic Security Dialogue and the Asia-Pacific Affairs Consultation. There are closer connections between our two peoples. Every year, more than 3 million visits are made between our two countries. Over 9,000 people are traveling across the Pacific each and every single day. We have 36 pairs of sister province-state relationships and 161 sister city relationships. As we speak, about 130,000 Chinese students are studying in the United States, and over 20,000 Americans studying in China. Currently, about 300 million people in China are learning English, and more than 200,000 people in the United States are learning the Chinese language. The two countries have kept effective communication and cooperation on many important regional and global issues, such as counterterrorism, non-proliferation, global financial stability, climate change, and transnational crimes. It is fair to say that China-US relationship has evolved to such a point that would surprise even the most imaginative person 40 years ago. The fundamental reason and the driving force lie in the expanding common interests between the two countries and shared responsibilities in ensuring sustainable development and dealing with emerging global challenges. At the same time, China-US relationship is probably one of the most complex bilateral relationships in the world. China and the United States are different in our political system, social value, historic and cultural traditions. There's a huge gap in the level of economic and social development, with China being the largest developing country and the United States being the largest developed country. In terms of power structure, China is an emerging economy, while the United States is a strong, established power. These differences have decided that we do not see eye to eye with each other on many issues. These differences can also lead to misunderstanding and mistrust in each other's strategic intentions. In the history of human civilization, there perhaps has never existed such a bilateral relationship as the China-US relationship before. Therefore, there's no easy path to follow and no historical experience or model to copy. How we finally choose to manage, shape, and grow this relationship will determine its course in the next 40 years. In January this year, President Hu visited the United States. Among the many results that came out of the visit, the most important was the shared commitment that President Hu and President Obama have made in the joint statement, that the two sides will work together to build a cooperative partnership based on mutual respect and mutual benefit. This has laid the groundwork, and it depends on how we work together to make it happen. We must view China-US relations from a new perspective. In the era of globalization, and given the size and the degree of interconnectedness of the two countries, China and the United States can be regarded as a community of interests. This is not and should not be a zero-sum game relationship. If people continue to look at each other with the Cold War mindset, China and the United States will be drawn into confrontation and conflict. It is imperative to shift from the old habitual way of thinking and begin to frame China-US relations from a strategic and long-term perspective. We could both emerge as winners if we work together as true partners. We must fully tap the potential to advance our mutual economic interests. Our economic trade relations have always been the cornerstone and engine for our overall relations. Currently, China and the United States are undertaking massive efforts to restructure our economies. The core of China's 12th five-year plan is to transform the mode of economic development and expand domestic consumption. The United States is also striving to jumpstart its economy through revitalizing American manufacturing, strengthening infrastructure, and expanding export. This offers real opportunities, not only for increased trade and investment activities, but also for expanding cooperation in such areas as clean energy, energy conservation, environmental protection, and infrastructure. There's also great potential for collaboration at the sub-national level. In the past decade, 47 out of 50 states in America have seen a three-digit, in some cases even four-digit growth in their export to China. The China-US Government Forum, which was launched this summer, has been well received from both sides and will provide a new and effective platform to promote economic and trade ties at the sub-national level. We must continue to improve strategic mutual trust. Trust is the basis for any partnership. To a large extent, how deeply we trust each other determine whether we can cooperate and how well we cooperate. It is imperative to have a correct judgment and understanding of each other's strategic intention and policy objectives. Following his successful visit to China in August, Vice President Biden wrote in the New York Times that, quote, "A successful China can make our country more prosperous, not less," end of quote. Equally, a successful and growing America is also in China's interests. We need close dialogue and communications in order to build strategic trust and avoid miscalculations and misperceptions. We should take advantage of the dialogue mechanisms we have put in place, in particular, the strategic and economic dialogue, the strategic security dialogue, and the Asia-Pacific Affairs consultation, and use them fully and wisely in order to communicate in a prompt way and minimize the chances of conflicts and strategic surprises. We must properly handle differences and disagreements. In the history of China-US relations, the relationship will be smooth and stable when the core interests of one side is taken seriously and taken care of, and will be less so and even strained when it is not. The question of Taiwan is critically related to China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It is an issue that the Chinese people feel strongly about. Last month, the United States announced another large-scale arms sale to Taiwan. This has seriously interfered in China's internal affairs, undermined China's security, and damaged the China-US relations. It has cast serious doubt among the Chinese people over the sincerity and credibility of the United States to forge partnership with China and to contribute to the peaceful cross-strait relations. We urge the US side to fully implement the commitments it made in the 3 joint communiques, especially the August 17 joint communique, and take real actions to uphold the larger interest of China-US relations and peace stability in the Taiwan Strait. Our economic and trade relationship is so big and expanding so fast, and it would be strange if it is problem-free. But to politicize economic problems will not work. We recognize that there is trade imbalance between China and the United States. Such imbalance is caused by a combination of factors, including the structural trade and investment differences, divergent patterns of saving and consumption, and the international division of labor, rather than an issue of the RMB exchange rate. In fact, the RMB has appreciated by nearly 30% since the reform of the exchange rate regime started in July 2005. However, between 2005 and 2011, the US unemployment rate actually increased from 5.1% to 9.1%. This shows that the RMB appreciation alone will not help reduce the trade imbalances, nor will it help to lower the unemployment rate in the United States. We do not seek trade surplus with the United States. We have taken steps to import more from the United States in an effort to address the imbalance. Domestically, we are working to improve our legal framework, strengthen IPR protection, provide a favorable and level playing field for foreign businesses in terms of indigenous innovation and government procurement. It is important that the US side take similar steps to ease the restrictions on high-tech exports to China and provide an open and friendly environment for Chinese investment, which can contribute to the US economy and the employment here. I now come to the second part of my address, how China sees the impact of its own development in relation to the rest of the world. Recently, in the United States, there has been a lot of interest in China's rise. Some people see the rise more as an opportunity, while others regard it more as a threat. Some even suggested to contain China. Many people have debated the pros and cons of the China phenomenon. The People's Republic of China has gone through an extraordinary journey in the 62 years since it was founded, particularly over the past 32 years of reform and opening up. China is now the second largest economy, the largest exporter, and the biggest emerging market in the world. More than 300 million people in the rural areas have been lifted out of poverty. The average life expectancy increased from 35 in 1949 to 73.5 in 2010. The living standards, educational and cultural levels of the Chinese people have greatly improved. However, despite China's impressive achievements, it is still a developing country in the true sense of the word. Our per capita GDP is only $4,400, 1/10 of that of the United States, and ranks behind 100th in the world. Based on the United Nations standards of $1 per day, 150 million Chinese are still living under the poverty line. Unbalanced development exists between the urban and rural areas and among different regions. The structural problems in economic and social development remains acute, and economic growth, which excessively depends on resources input, is increasingly constrained by resource shortage and environmental problems. China's social security system is inadequate, lagging far behind those of the developed countries. There's clearly a long way to go, but we will continue to forge ahead steadily and peacefully for the goods of the people in China and beyond. We recognize that there are challenges associated with China's rapid growth. But what has happened has proved and will prove that China's peaceful development not only brings tangible benefits to the people of China, but also can positively contribute to the well-being of the rest of the world. First, China can serve as an important engine for world economic growth and prosperity. In recent years, China has contributed to over 10% of the world's economic growth, over 12% to international trade. Since its accession into WTO, it has contributed to over 30% to the world economy, imported nearly $750 billion of goods, and created more than 14 million jobs for trade partners. After the global financial crisis broke out, China has worked closely with the international community and played an important role in facilitating global economic recovery and growth. In the next 5 years, China's imports will reach $10 trillion, providing further opportunities to farmers, manufacturers, and workers in other parts of the world. China has played its part in meeting the United Nations Millennium Development Goals by canceling over 25 billion RMB of debts for 50 heavily indebted poor countries and least developed countries, and by providing over $30 billion of financial aid to Africa and other developing countries. We are helping least developed countries expand their exports to China and have pledged zero tariff treatment for 95% of their imports. Second, China can serve as a positive force for world peace and stability. China is the only nuclear weapon country that has publicly stated that it will not be the first to use nuclear weapons, will use or threaten to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states or nuclear weapon-free zones. China opposes all forms of terrorism and has taken an active part in international cooperation in anti-terrorism and non-proliferation. China has played a constructive role in addressing such international and regional issues as the Korean nuclear issue, the Iranian nuclear issue, and has helped to establish the six-party talks mechanism on the Korean nuclear issue. China has taken an active part in international peacekeeping operations. We have sent 210,000 personnel to 30 UN operations, more than any other permanent members of the UN Security Council. We have dispatched naval escort fleets to the Gulf of Aden and the waters of the Somali coast, playing a constructive role in combating piracy and ensuring the safety and security of international navigation routes. Third, China can serve as a contributor to international systems and regimes. China has joined 100 intergovernmental organizations, signed more than 300 international instruments, and is a responsible participant and contributor in the international system. We support multilateralism. We will continue to take part in international cooperation, promote reform of the global governance structure, contribute to formulation and improvement of international rules, and make the international order more just and equitable. We will continue to participate in the G20 process, encourage it to move from a crisis responding mechanism to a platform for international economic governance, and better reflect the aspirations and interests of the developing countries. China's increase in the quota and the voting power in the World Bank and the IMF will enable us to play a more constructive role in improving world economic governance and economic rebalancing. China is the first developing country to formulate and implement the National Climate Change Program. It is also one of the countries which have made the greatest efforts in energy saving and emission reduction, and which have made the fastest progress in developing new and renewable sources of energy in recent years. We will stick to international climate change negotiation and work with others to protect our globe based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. Fourth, China can serve as an important force for a stable and prosperous Asia and Pacific. China is an Asia-Pacific country. We have a stake in a prosperous and secure Asia-Pacific and will contribute to it with our own development. The fundamental goal of our Asia-Pacific policy is to achieve mutually beneficial and common development with regional countries, including with the United States. In maintaining peace and stability in Asia-Pacific, we have reached out to our neighbors to build political trust through security dialogue and military exchanges. We have resolved the border issues with 12 neighboring countries sharing border with us. We support the freedom and security of navigation in the South China Sea and have worked with the relevant parties to promote maritime security cooperation. China is committed to peacefully resolving the maritime disputes with relevant countries through bilateral negotiations and friendly consultations. China values the role of the ASEAN Regional Forum in enhancing mutual trust among the members and in strengthening regional dialogue and cooperation. China's economic growth has been a strong driving force for the region. We have built closer trade relations and cooperation with regional partners and have stood up with them in the face of the financial crisis. We will sustain our efforts to ensure that the Asia-Pacific achieves strong, sustainable, and balanced growth. We support regional economic integration. The China-ASEAN Free Trade Area, which was established last year, opens broad prospects for intra-regional trade and investment. We will continue to promote trade liberalization and investment facilitation and support the role of APEC as a platform for economic cooperation. China and the United States share broad common interest in the Asia-Pacific. We are brought together by the common mission to maintain peace and stability and achieve prosperity in the region. We respect the legitimate interest and presence of the United States in the Asia-Pacific and welcome a positive and constructive role by the United States in the region. We support and welcome the United States' participation in the East Asia Summit. We attach great importance to the Asia-Pacific Affairs Consultation and see it as an effective cooperation mechanism to advance bilateral interests as well as the common good for the entire region. To conclude, I want to quote a saying by another Harvard alumni, the renowned American essayist, lecturer, and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, quote, "Don't go where the path may lead. Go instead where there's no path and leave a trail," end of quote. China and the United States, two great nations, share enormous common interests and common responsibilities in this fast-changing globalized world. We need vision, courage, and wisdom in order to leave a trail towards a new type of relationship, a trail towards a new model for different social systems to grow and flourish together. I thank you very much for your patience and your attention. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Zhang, thank you very, very much. That was comprehensive on the U.S.-China relationship, on how China views its own role in the world. I'm sure it'll elicit lots of questions and lots of views from our students and guests.